Now let's call this meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Showalter.
Here.
Myers.
Here.
Howard.
Here.
Redlin.
Here.
Thompson.
Here. Show me the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, any public comment? Anybody signed in? No? No presentations or proclamations, so we'll move on to the consent agenda. A, the March 7th Commission meeting minutes. B, the March 14th Joint Commission meeting minutes. And C, appropriation ordinances 2022-06, 2022-06A, and 2022-P06. Any questions, comments on those? I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Howard,
I'll second.
seconded by Commissioner Redlin. Any other further discussion? Roll, please.
Redlin.
Yes.
Myers.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes.
Showalter.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes. Okay, move on to 5, ordinances and resolutions. Ordinance 1745, changing membership requirements for the Construction Advisory Board. Kent?
This we had brought up at a previous meeting to change the membership requirements of the Construction Advisory Board of Trades and Appeals.
There was two different things that was brought up. We had a previous applicant for the commission who has a business here in town, but happens to live outside the city limits. And thought the residency requirements for the Citizens Advisory Board, and it's more about the specific trades that are involved. It was thought that the residency requirement could be Sherman County instead of City of Goodland only. So that was one thing that's involved with it, and I'll let Jeff speak regarding the other item, regarding the
Yeah, the other item, I was reading and researching, just kind of looking through, and there's number 2 on the item there is one City of Goodland licensed general commercial contractor, and currently, I don't know if they've ever done it, but we don't have offered that license here for the City of Goodland. Didn't realize that, but like I said, did a little research on it. The ones we do allow, of course, here we are. Get to it. We offer a general contractor, a building contractor, and a residential contractor, and a demolition contractor. So we kind of discussed it and talked with Jake and thought about just taking out the commercial side and just having, you know, a general contractor and a residential contractor. So that's kind of where that came about.
Okay. Thank you for your research in doing that.
You bet.
The other little part that's included within the ordinance is to have, instead of a licensed master electrician or a licensed master plumber or licensed master mechanic, was to just have it as a licensed electrician, licensed plumber, and a licensed mechanic. The master's license, there are a few contractors that go ahead and get that accomplished, but Jeff had done quite a bit of research in other communities' codes as well regarding that requirement, and most of them just kept it as the standard licensed electrician. Obviously, you're going to want someone on the Board of Trades and Appeals that has quite a bit of experience, but whether that person actually have a master's license or not, a lot of times it's not stated in the codes. So that's why it's put before you. With this change, just included it along with the residency requirement to change it to just make it cleaner.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, I would entertain a motion to approve the changes to ordinance 1745. And a motion by Commissioner Showalter,
Second?
second by Commissioner Myers. Any other further discussion? Roll, please.
Showalter?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Redland?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes. Thank you.
I should stay up here, Jeff.
Yep.
No, I meant the next item is probably yourself as well.
Planning?
Yeah.
All right, moving on to formal actions. A, the Construction Board of Trades and Appeals appointments. Jonathan Payne, Justin Carter, Peyton Worker, and Charlie Baker. Whole list of names.
You again. Well, I've reached out to several other people in the community, and of course, Jonathan, he's still very interested in wanting to come aboard. And then reached out to a couple other realtors and had one, Peyton, that was really interested, young, moving back to the community and wants to see how the community can grow, and he wants to get involved in not only something like this, but other commissions and so forth, or boards, so. And then Justin Carter, I've talked to several times. He's taken on, he wants to become a master, I think, with gas plumber, that he's waiting on the college to get their pronto test set up, so he can just do the testing here. So that's, been working with him on that too, and the college also, so. He's really eager and interested in helping and getting up to date on our codes and moving forward, so it's kind of where those three gentlemen came in. I'm trying to think which other ones I have.
Charlie Baker.
Charlie Baker, there we go. Thanks, Kent. Don't know why I didn't think of Charlie Baker before, but just kind of going through the list and other contractors that I haven't reached out to, and he was one. And I see Painter, didn't realize he was a contractor, and I got to looking and actually reached out to him and visited with him, and he is 100% on board. I guess he was a past member of the board and was actually, he stated he was the president of the board, so. Didn't really get going on the meetings and so forth, things kind of fell went south on him, but he's eager to get back on and get our codes up to date also, so.
Good deal. I know both him and Justin have tons of experience, leaving that a long time. I know Peyton's fairly young, but I think he's a very ambitious young man.
Yep, I reached out to his, actually, Nathan at first, and Nathan just with the kids, and he's too busy with other activities, he's afraid to commit to it. And so that's when I visit with the other gentleman, he said, yeah, it should be all right, but being young, no kids, single, he thought he could tackle it, so.
Anyone have any questions? I do have one question, it's more for Mary, I think. With the passing of the resolution, is there a time frame that we have to wait as far as it being published or anything for us to?
Resolutions aren't published.
No, so we can go ahead and move
But
forward
this is an
with.
ordinance. The one, it's an
Sure.
ordinance.
Yeah,
And so
okay,
it will
yeah.
have to be published in Friday's paper before it's effective, yes.
So we have to wait another meeting then for Jonathan's then for,
What I would do is I would go ahead and approve it upon when the ordinance is in effect.
okay?
That's what I would do, so it doesn't come back and you get it off the table.
Okay, I would entertain a motion.
We can do those separately. Decide now, that's fine.
Probably be cleaner.
Yeah. Okay. I move that we appoint Jonathan Payne to the Board of Trade and Appeals.
Upon the,
Upon the approval of the resolution,
for the ordinance.
the ordinance, sorry.
Okay, a motion by Commissioner Showalter,
A second?
a second by Commissioner Redland. Any other discussion? Roll
Roll,
call.
please.
Myers?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Redlin?
Yes.
Showalter?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, anything else on that same action?
I move that we appoint Justin Carter to the Board of Trade and Appeals upon approval of the ordinance.
I think the other three all live in town, right?
So they're all the same? Yes.
So I think we can move all three of those at the same time if you wanted.
Okay, and Peyton Ortner and Charlie Baker.
Okay, I have a motion by Commissioner Howard,
Second?
second by Commissioner Myers. Any other further discussion? Roll, please.
Showalter?
Yes.
Myers?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Redlin?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
Okay,
Okay, we'll move on to B, the Planning Commission appointments. We have Matt McKenzie and Grady Bonzola. Want to speak to them at all?
Members, commission members, we've had two people that have filled out some information, making their board applications to become part of the planning commission. Talked with both these gentlemen about their reasons for coming on the planning commission, and they were very interested in serving their community. Did invite both of them to come tonight. I don't know if I see Matt's here.
Yeah.
They can probably come and speak regarding to the commission, introduce themselves, and
Give a little bit of information, why you'd like to serve on the planning commission.
You bet. Good evening, I'm Matt McKenzie. For those of you that don't know, we're recently back in Goodland, full-time now. So we grew up here, lived my whole life here, but we moved in and out several times with my full-time job. But we're back, and hopefully we're here for good this time, but we will see. So I am a licensed building contractor with the city of Goodland because we own property on Main Street, and I primarily have that license so I can work on my own stuff and working with Jeff to make sure everything is good to go. And just interested in helping out, serving the community, looking to get involved again. So I dropped an application off with the city and got a call, so.
Awesome, thank you for your interest.
You bet.
Yes, sir.
And Grady was invited, but was unable to be here tonight, so, but he provided quite a bit of information to you as far as the, different application questions that was provided for planning commission. So, just recommend it to the board for appointment. And if you have any other questions for staff, we stand ready to answer.
Anybody have any questions? Not, I would entertain a motion to approve their appointments.
I move to approve the appointments of Matt McKenzie and Grady Bonzel to the Planning Commission.
I have a motion by Commissioner Redlin,
I'll second.
a second by Commissioner Howard. Any other further discussion? Roll, please.
Howard,
Yes.
Redlin,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Showalter,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes. All right, thank you.
We still have three more chairs on that planning commission, so we'll still be accepting applications from, if there's community members interested in serving. You at least now know two members that will be serving on the board that would work with you. So we'll look forward to see if we receive any more interest from the community.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to C, the renewal of property casualty and liability insurance. Jackie, if you'd like to
Come up and speak.
Hi. They put stuff in your packet, right?
Yes. Yes, ma'am.
The exciting insurance stuff. So thanks for having me here. For the new commission members, we've had the insurance with EMC. Well, we've had the city's insurance for a number of years. We've had it with EMC since 2020. Prior to that, we had it with a broker because we had some driving issues, so we had to move it to a broker so that we could keep the package, but before that, it had been with EMC for years. EMC probably does the best job of insuring cities of any company, and most companies don't even write cities anymore. We used to have a bunch of markets, but now it's very hard. The Travelers will write some property, but nobody wants to write the linebacker. Nobody wants to write your output over there at the power plant, so it does make it hard. In reviewing the stuff with Mary and Kent last week, the overall package went up 8%. I'm pretty sure they put that premium summary in your packet, right? You did make several changes last year. We added some vehicles, deleted one. We did increase some property values during the year in about June last year, and we added a lot of playground equipment and picnic tables and some stuff at the museum. So when I say it went up 8%, that includes those changes that were prorated, so it's probably really not 8%. The building values all went up, of course. You also all know it's probably not enough, but how much can you afford to go up? That was about the exciting stuff. The only thing I mentioned to Kent and Mary was we decided we would talk about this next year, but I did bring up the law and ordinance coverage because it would become an issue if like the town was destroyed and we had to go back and figure out if the law and ordinance for all of your buildings were up to date. The easiest way for me to explain that is using the city of St. Francis when they had their hailstorm in 2012. They had a city ordinance for the thicker felt. Well, all the houses got hailed out, and if your homeowner's policy didn't have that law and ordinance coverage, you didn't have the upgrade for the thicker felt. So that'd be minimal if this building is upgraded to code for the ADA and stuff. So we decided that you guys are working on your city ordinances, so we probably wouldn't visit that this year, but maybe next year we would talk about it. The only other thing I was really kind of worried about was your business income and extra expense. EMC does provide you $1 million of coverage. And I said, I don't know if that's enough. If again, town was wiped out, you had to find a place to relocate the police department, this building, any other buildings you had, if you had to think about paying all of your employees, would $1 million be enough? And we kind of left that there. The only way to know if you have enough is you have to give me your net revenue, and we'd have to figure out if you had enough coverage or not. And again, I only see that posing a problem if the whole city gets wiped out. But the weather's crazy, so this would be something you guys think about. The other thing was the cyber, and I'm sure, is that in the packet too? The cyber quote?
Yes, and it's a separate, we separated out from the approval of the rest of the quote.
Okay.
And Josh is still looking at additional information regarding the cyber and waiting for additional answers back from it, so.
So Josh and I did talk today, and maybe I should ask her a question. Do you want me to do the first thing first, and then we go back, or are you okay with me talking about it?
Either way, whatever's comfortable for you. I mean, we can take care of the property, and let's go ahead and take care of the property issues, and then go to cyber.
Well, did you guys have any questions for me about it?
Sounds like everything's going up. That's why it's
The way of the world right now.
the way of the world.
Do we have any other questions regarding the property? I would entertain a motion on the renewal. The total amount would be $301,962. The renewal of the insurance.
I'll move.
The motion by Commissioner Redland,
I'll second that.
a second by Commissioner Showalter. Any other further discussion? Roll, please.
Myers?
Yes.
Redland?
Yes.
Howard?
Yes.
Showalter?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes. Okay, now we can move on to the cybersecurity.
Okay. So, in visiting with Kent and Mary last week, I had told them that the broker for the cyber was gonna move companies because the old company would not offer a quote anymore. So you currently have $3 million worth of cyber coverage. And you have a, I forget the deductible, a $10,000 deductible, I believe. Yes, $10,000 deductible. On the quote first, they didn't give you the concierge service, which if you're gonna buy cyber, you wanna have, because what that means to you is you call an 800 number, they do all the work for you. Otherwise, if you don't pay that money to have that concierge service, you have to know the law in every state. So if I moved to New York, but I had your city service, you have to know New York laws. You have to, if you ever have a breach, notify every customer you ever had that you had a breach, no matter if you have them currently or not. So when we wrote this policy initially, we made sure we had that coverage, so you only had to call the 800 number. So this company kind of ticked me off because they didn't put that on there, and they didn't tell me they were moving carriers. So I quoted you guys with Coalition, which is a whole lot more money, but it's a way better policy. The limit of liability is lower. But after talking with Josh today, I am comfortable with you guys renewing with this premium of $11,054, which it went up almost 50% from last year because that's how many cyber claims they're having right now. And I heard you talk about Russia when you walked in. Of course, that's all we hear. Cyber claims went up 38% just last year. And I know everybody goes, well, what kind of cyber? You guys do ACH here. To have a cyber claim, all you need is really a name and an address on a piece of paper. And that could put you in a cyber event. Even though it's not technology whatsoever. People don't realize that just a few things could really cause you to have pain as far as cyber. I don't really see any need to have that coalition policy because, like I said, Josh and I visited for like 30 minutes today, and he was telling me some stuff you guys do, and you guys would be fine having this policy. I was really worried about it to begin with, but then I'm like, no, he's got you guys covered. He does a really good job, and he really knows what's what, and so I would be comfortable renewing it where it's at.
You have anything you would wish to say regarding the coverage?
No, not really.
Okay. I'm gonna throw out a hypothetical here, and it's not gonna happen, but let's say 4 months from now, Josh leaves, and we have somebody else in who maybe isn't as knowledgeable as Josh as to what's going on. Where would that leave us then if we had an issue?
I'm assuming with what he tells me is provided either, I don't know if he's done it or if it's provided by the city. I'm assuming you'd be okay.
Some of the stuff that these companies provide for us, we actually get straight from the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
So, due to things I've done in the past in contacting some of those groups, we've been able to really up our cyber defenses using things like that.
Okay. Good to know.
Yeah, it's good to know.
Okay, so originally, I think a recommendation to the commission was to go for the more expensive coverage, but you are now recommending that that is not the case. We don't necessarily need that because our own back-end support has that covered. So the
He's doing a really good job.
original company with the lower amount would be all we would need.
Yes.
Anybody have any questions?
Apparently that thing does.
It
must have.
Is there a deductible? Is that with cyber?
Yeah, so it's 10,000.
That is the 10,000, okay.
It's, yeah, the retention is how it reads on that quote. If you have it.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay, so I think the actual amount on that one is $11,054, correct?
Plus the 250 more for the concierge. You don't have to take that, but to me, it's worthless if you don't have it because you don't want to have to do all that back end stuff.
Why is it that you have to?
Especially when it comes to the state of California. They have even more strict privacy laws than any other state right now.
So we're looking at $11,304 total with the concierge service. Anyone else have any other questions?
This, Hiscox company that you've worked with them before and have good luck with them.
Yeah, so they are a really big company. They write all kinds of big risks.
Okay.
So they're a good company. You won't have any problem with them.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Mayor, I motion that we renew our policy with Hiscox with the concierge service added.
I'll second.
For the total of $11,304.
Yes, sir.
I have a motion by Commissioner Showalter, a second by Commissioner Rhodes. Any other discussion? Roll, please.
Howard,
Yes.
Redmond,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Showalter,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you. I was thinking.
Thank you, Jackie.
Yeah, thanks for your work.
Okay, we'll move on to E, the hangar lease for Travis and Kent.
And mentioned this previously, we had a situation at the airport where Barker Farm Services had a termination of their lease. They had signed a lease agreement with the city at the beginning of last year to build a hangar on lots 1 and 2 at Renner Field. It's come into a situation where he was unable to do that, so he terminated lease. He had also talked with Travis Amb of American Aviation Incorporated. And American is with a B in the middle of it, and it matches his name. So, and he is willing. He's actually coming back to Goodland. He's lived in Goodland previously, and he's coming back to Goodland and will operate his business out of Goodland and other places where his clients are. So the lease that's put forward is the same that we had with Barker Farm Services Incorporated. The bigger thing with the lease is in order for them to get the actual building built. So, and I can ask Jake just to speak on the couple things that we added on the request of the airport board.
So the airport board, they wanted to see construction start, and so we've got a time frame in there that they actually have to begin construction of the building or the hangar out there. The other thing that they asked, obviously, was to also not necessarily be the approval board for the building plans, but that they would also go through there and get all the building permits, but they would be able to see it and address some maybe concerns before they get started. So little bit of checks and balances there, but ultimately it has to be approved by your planning commissioner, by your code enforcement officer. Same thing, they have to get all the building permits before they can get started.
They just wanted to make sure that it works with all the other buildings at the airport. So, so the design and also where the spacing is in the correct spot. They had a little bit of issue prior with some concrete being poured before there was a plan presented to the airport board, and they just want to make sure that doesn't happen in the future. So, so it is presented for your approval and stand for questions.
So you said there is I guess I'm reading through it, I don't see a specific time frame in here regarding
12 months to 24.
online.
Yes.
Something-
Requirement to start building a hangar within 12 months and complete. Within 24.
Reviewed by the airport board. I was reading through the actual lease, not up there.
It's in the lease as well, and I just want to make sure it'll be in the one that he signs. Because it wasn't one of the lease copies that we
I'm
had.
not seeing it in the actual lease copy here.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. We'll make sure he has to sign with that included. Because I don't know if there's a page missing or something on what was copied here. So we'll make sure that it's there.
Anybody have any other questions? Not, I would entertain a motion to approve.
I'll motion to approve the lease with Travis Ham, provided that we make sure that the addendum is on there.
I have a motion by Commissioner Showalter,
I'll second.
a second by Commissioner Redlin. Any other discussion? Roll, please.
Showalter,
Yes.
Howard,
Yes.
Myers,
Yes.
Redlin,
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes. Okay, we'll move on to 7 discussion items. A, proposed chicken ordinance review. Kent, get us going, would you?
This was on the discussion agenda last meeting. Commissioners requested that it be on this portion of the meeting as well for this time to allow people to contact both the commissioners and also to come to the meeting itself if they wanted to and make their comments known regarding this proposed ordinance. There really isn't anything in addition to what was included in the packet last time. I did have one comment. I know that there was quite a few comments received when it was posted on the website and the subsequent responses to that. I don't know where that ended up. How many comments we received was around 90 or 100, or was there far more than that?
I think it was right around 100. Yeah,
They sent us something.
and I mean there was
It outed.
a lot of comments. You know, a lot of feelings both ways. You know, regarding this thing. You know, it wasn't definitely one way was really way more than the other. You know, like it was on the comments on. It was about 2 or 3 to 2 split or 2 to 1 or
2/3, yeah.
yeah 4 to against, but it sure wasn't, you know, sweeping one way or the other.
I did receive one comment on a phone call on Friday. She was trying to figure out a way to participate electronically and eventually said, why don't you just tell me your comment and I'll repeat it at the meeting. And she said that she's been here for several decades, and she says she's against farm animals of any kind in town, and that people should have a right to say what type of farm animal is in town. Doesn't think it's an issue for just the 5 people on the commission. She had a previous issue with rabbits next door that she said could be something similar with chickens. So that was her comment. So I just wanted to say that so that it's entered into the record, as the representatives would say. So
Can you or Mary provide any background on exactly how many times this has come before the commission? Has it been voted on before, or has it just been discussed and tabled?
If it was tabled or if it was just, people were against it. Those were the ones that spoke up.
Do you know when the most recent one was?
The one against?
Just the last time that it was voted on by this body?
I honestly, I don't know. Jason? I think it was when Andrew was here. Yeah, I don't think it was ever voted.
Okay.
I think it was just, they didn't want to take it any further.
I think in the minutes, it's come up twice, but I don't know if it ever got to a vote. It was just for discussion and then kind of was never brought to a formal vote.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't say that with 100% certainty.
I think they just chose not to take it any further.
2016, they voted to maintain the code.
Judge.
Okay,
Say this, people are passionate about their poultry. I've had probably more interaction, community interaction over this specific issue than anything else that we've discussed or talked about.
any other discussion?
What's the ordinance on burying animals in the city limits?
Give me to the city code. Animals. In general. And it's in chapter 2 in the city code. And it says 2:101, keeping animals in the city. It shall be unlawful for any person, firm, or corporation to keep or maintain horses, mules, asses, cattle, hogs, sheep, goats, fowl, or other similar animals within the city of Goodland, Kansas. This article shall not apply to canaries, parrots, or other types of birds that are not prohibited by any other law normally kept in cages.
But the burial of.
Oh, the burial.
Burial of.
I
Like
misunderstood
Yeah,
you.
the pet dog, cats, is there ordinance against that?
What are you asking?
How to bury them.
It says, on number 6, burial of a carcass is a minimum of 2 feet deep. I was just wondering if there's a ordinance that goes along with that for pets, your cat and dog, is that allowed to be buried in the city limits too?
I can't find it quick enough. Josh, if you can find it.
I don't know, just kind of a quick peruse through. I'm not sure that there is anything regarding burial in here.
Well, if you can't bury your dog or your cat, there's no sense in burying a chicken.
Sure, fair. Just want to make.
Yeah.
I guess that then brings up the question, if it's not stated specifically either way.
Right.
It's not prohibited,
Yeah.
but just as long as it still has a tag. No, I'm just kidding.
I don't know that there's anything in city ordinance, but I'm guessing there's probably something from KDHE that outlines what can be buried and what can't, and how close to a waterway and all that stuff.
Yeah, that might be where it's at.
Would be my guess.
I don't see anything directly. So I'll have to do a little research on that. Ask our animal control officer.
Any other discussion? I guess my own personal thoughts is I am okay moving forward into the next step to look at, decide if we to if we want to actually vote on the ordinance or not. You know, if we're not to that point yet, if we still think we need to make changes to the proposed ordinance, you know, I would like us to see, you know, under the penalty section about what can happen if you don't follow through with what you're supposed to. That's empty right now. Basically just says, you know, we'll come later. I think that should be addressed to exactly what the penalty would be before any approval were to be made.
Should we discuss that?
Sure.
I guess. Because I'm interested to hear.
Oh, you're just one,
I'm
okay.
interested to hear.
They're waiting for your opinion.
Sure, I mean, I thought you were gonna say something,
No,
no?
apologies, I'm sorry. I'm interested to hear what you all have.
So on here it says that failure to remove the animals after being revoked of this permit will result in a citation being issued, and the offending individual shall be subject to fines still to be determined. So I guess, do we want to determine what kind of a fine would be had if somebody was told to get rid of their chickens and they didn't get rid of their chickens? And what an appropriate amount would be?
Also, maybe you could write that in a way, because like, say somebody goes and they buy, you know, just baby chicks, and then they find out that they have, out of the, you know, whatever, however many we decide, they decide to have 5 chickens or whatever, you know, and they get 3 hens and 2 roosters. We need to probably write something into that to, you know, the removal of the roosters.
Yeah, and that is kind of up in there under section 5,
Is it?
colon and mortality. It just basically says that they will need to deal with unwanted males, old hens, or sick birds properly.
Okay. I didn't read that.
You know, one thing that the, you know, City Attorney Kling also stated was the penalty for the violations of the parts of the animal code that's regarding dogs and cats. It states that wherever in this chapter any act is prohibited or declared to be unlawful, or the performance of any act is required, or the failure to do any act is declared to be unlawful, the violation of any provision of this chapter shall be punished by a fine of not more than $2,500. You know, you can always have of not more or up to, you know, $2,500 is pretty extensive, but dog bites and vicious dogs and those type of things sometimes get into damage of fences or houses or, you know, or medical bills. And that's why that gets to be that amount that's stated in there. It also has or by imprisonment for a period not exceeding 1 year, and that might be a little extensive for chickens, but
Understand, in some of those sections though, you gotta be careful. If it is classified as a misdemeanor by state statute, those are the maximum penalties that you can impose. So it wasn't because our code says that, it's because state statute, because of a misdemeanor, allows for that. Now, I will tell you, no. We are not picking up people with dogs at large and slapping them in the county jail. It does help to have a range though, because as you guys kind of know, every year we go through and we reassess what the fines are. The state statutes provide for a ceiling of not more than this, because depending on what's going on in your city and everything that that's entailed in some of those things, you know, a dog at large, you get a ticket for $30, but then there's $70 court cost. That's imposed by the state on us. That's not us making that. But if something was going on again, you talk about prices are raising and stuff like that. Well, there is a cost to the city to enforce some of these codes, whether it be on patrol or now we've put more of a burden on our animal control officer. Maybe we got to hire another one. You know, different things like that. And I'm not saying this specifically towards the chickens. I'm just saying, don't lose context of, in your code section, when you're preparing a penalty section, no, you shouldn't say the fine will be $25. Because then if you want to change that, you got to go back and change the ordinances versus just doing your annual review of fines and fees and stuff like that. But you can put a lid on it. Shall be fined up to no more than blank.
Thanks, Jake.
My philosophical belief is you want to have a fine in the amount that is a deterrent. If it is way past that, it's not gonna deter anybody, because the same thing, nobody's gonna stand there like, they are not going to put me in jail for having a 7th chicken. You know, so there is a practicality to it. Don't look at me like that, Alex, I know you. But, so that's where, I wouldn't get too caught up in like, well, what do we put the price at and stuff like that. I would suggest you just do a lid. And this would be a code violation, these are not misdemeanors, so we're not talking jail time. So don't even get hung up on that stuff.
Okay.
So how do we,
So
so say we just set a lid of the $2,500, or whatever it is. How do we determine what the appropriate fine is then?
Is that left to just our building or whoever's enforcing?
You know,
Essentially, yes. When it gets down to it, if you put a lid on it, we then have a fine schedule that we put out there every single year, and it gets reviewed every year as to what it is, so. Depending on what your violation is, right? So if it's just the number of chickens, so you're over the limit, we have an amount that is a fine amount for over the limit for dogs. If you're allowed 4 dogs. I don't know what the fine amount is for that, but same idea. Every animal above that limit is a separate violation, right? So you can't have 15 dogs and only get 1 ticket. You guys follow me there? So, same idea. If you want it to be a violation of this code, you can be fined up to $100, something like that, then that I think would be appropriate. I think you get much above that or past that, you're probably dabbling a little bit in some capital punishment stuff.
same thing as far as like living conditions, there's a scale for that as well.
Correct.
Okay.
I guess I'd be curious to hear Mr. Dinkle's opinion on the matter, since he's would be the one enforcing.
Well, I haven't dug into it too deep, just kind of getting into it. But what I ran into just this past, since the last commission meeting, it was posted in the newspaper, is I actually been approached about what it would take to have ducks, rabbits, and honeybees. So, otherwise I haven't really, had much saying. My only question I had was answered about how do you tell the difference between a rooster and a hen at the time, which is kind of listed in here, so. As far as doing it, it's my job, I do what I have to do, so.
Thank you.
So we want,
The
penalty section is basically tied to the rest of the animal section.
I think so.
Yes.
So if we're setting like the no more than 2,500, is that what we're kind of saying?
Or whatever.
Or whatever
Yeah,
the previous
whatever it is.
ordinance
Maybe
stated.
we need to
Get
get that all dug out and sent to us as well. just so we can-
Sure.
What we can do is put together an actual, we basically did that, but staff can review it and put together an actual ordinance, and it can be on your agenda for next time, and it could be on the discussion agenda, not for formal approval, but that's the actual ordinance we want to do, and you can review it at that time. And then, I know it's delaying it again, but this is the actual ordinance. And it sounds like it's okay to at least put it to a vote, but you want to take care of the exact parameters of the ordinance and have that in front of you. And you could have the option, since you've discussed it at a couple previous meetings, to say we want to move that up onto a formal action, but it'll have the actual ordinance that you would actually vote on and see if there's anything else missing or any other concerns that you would have.
Okay. Another question I had on there was, under section 7, the permit application section, it was $25 every 2 years. It says how, what every 2 years, it's like an annual permit.
That,
Or I guess, what is everybody's thoughts regarding that?
that's up to your choice. And then if you have a license, does there need to be an inspection of the actual living standards every single year? Which would take an additional, little bit of staff time to do that, so.
Thoughts?
I don't have a problem with the fee every 2 years, but an inspection maybe every year. Just to make sure that living accommodations haven't been changed.
We're not currently doing any inspections for anybody getting a dog tag, correct?
Not that I know of. Chief Hayes, is there anything that you're aware of?
No.
So this would be outside of what would be normal for current orders in effect. We're not, I mean, we're doing something extra.
Yeah, with dogs, it's on a complaint basis. You know, if the dog runs are not being kept properly, which happens every once in a while. If they're not being, don't have enough shade, or don't have enough food and water at various times, or don't have a big enough place for the number of dogs. Those are all on a complaint basis, but there's nothing that we do on an annual basis regarding those animals.
I guess I struggle a little bit with an ordinance that would put more burden on a citizen that, you know, is not in any other animal ordinance. That's just more times that, you know, our people that are working have to go out and do an inspection. That's more money that we have to put in, more time that they're taking away from what they're already doing. You know, they've already gone through an inspection when they got their initial permit. We're just creating more, basically, red tape for them to have to jump through, so. I guess my opinion is if that, you know, if we're gonna write the ordinance, we're gonna vote on that, that's part of it that I don't know that I would necessarily support. Once they go through the initial inspection, that should be enough unless there's a complaint.
I think I could agree with that too. That initial inspection should have to happen, I do think, just to make sure that things are in place. But if you can put beyond that, you know, I think if it were to pass, I think enough eyes would be on everybody's, on everybody's file that if something was not being taken care of, it would be reported, then you can check out at that point. You guys?
I agree with that.
Okay. Any other discussion about it?
So are we comfortable with the every 2 years then, or do we wanna do it annually? No, we want that written.
It says application, so it'd be something like a license?
Basically, yeah,
Yeah.
like a licensing fee.
What do we pay for, or what do people pay for dogs, to license their dogs?
$5.
$5.
It's $250 and $5 until February 28th, and then it's $5 and $10.
What's the difference between 5 and 10 again?
Spayed or neutered,
And that's per dog, right, Mary?
yes.
And that's also annual.
Yeah.
So is this a $25 flat rate across the board, no matter how many chickens you're supposed to have?
Yeah, that's,
Right now, we're only allowing 4 in this ordinance.
but it's not $25 per chicken.
So if somebody wanted to have 2, we're still charging $25. Okay. Just want to clarify that.
I would think, you guys can tell us differently.
Yeah.
No,
No, I think that would be the way to do it for sure. Any other thoughts?
I think we should increase the cap to at least 6, if you're gonna do it. 6 isn't that bad, to me. And a lot of the other places, they said 4 to 6.
It has something to do with the size of the yard too, doesn't it?
Yes, I believe so.
Well, you have coop minimums, that you have to have. You have to say that you have to have a larger coop.
So some people probably could only do 4, you know.
Any other thoughts regarding the number of chickens? We're okay with 6?
Yeah.
4? Don't matter, think 4? 2?
I think like, you know, just saying like up to 6, like that's the cap. I got that from Jake.
Mayor, I was just informed by text that, I wasn't here during this time, but when the pit bulls were allowed before they were banned, if you wanted to have a pit bull, then there was an inspection. I don't know if it was annually, that's something I would have to look into, but like I said, I wasn't.
Yeah,
here
it was
at the time.
annually.
But I don't know if that would be relevant to chickens, but I was asked a question, were there inspections? Yes, they were. And I would assume the inspections were like a fenced-in yard in what's the word I'm looking for? That doesn't need to be repaired, or that could be repaired before the pit bull was allowed. So I can look into that a little bit further and see if I can find that, if you believe it's relevant to the question about the inspection for the chickens.
Yeah.
I don't know,
I think
like
like
an
the initial
inspection
inspection
would
would
happen.
happen. For sure, I think is what we're saying. We want an initial inspection of
The
the
coop
coop
and
and
the
the quarters that the
chickens
chickens
would
would be in.
And
And
then
then
beyond
beyond
that,
that, it would just be, an as-needed basis if somebody were to call in and say, something is being taken care of.
Right.
This guy's fence fell down and now the dog's in my yard type thing.
Yeah.
A complaint.
Okay, so
This
this
point,
point,
amongst
our
our
discussion,
based
based off of the
working
working
ordinance
ordinance that we have here, we decided,
as
as
far
far
as
as penalty section goes,
to
to tie it into the penalty sections of the rest of the animals.
within the ordinances. Permit fee every 2 years, but no inspection with those permits, just the initial inspection. Up to 6 instead of 4. Have I missed anything? Is that covered all? Are there any other discussion? So at this point, do we want to continue to move forward with this? And if we do we want to move forward as another discussion next week with an actual true ordinance that we may vote on under the discussion item? Do we want to bring it in as a formal action with the changes we proposed? Do we want to not move forward with it? What would we like to do? And I just would point out, regardless of how we put it on the agenda, if we move forward, if we put it under a formal action for next meeting, we wouldn't necessarily have to vote on it. We could table it if we wanted to. And if it's under discussion items and we come to an agreement, we could still go ahead and vote on it then too. I guess it's just kind of a matter of how serious we feel we are at this point as to where we would like it to be on the agenda, if we would like it to be on the agenda.
What's your opinion?
My opinion is I think I would like to bring it forward probably under the discussion items again next meeting with the changes that we put into it.
I'm in favor of that. And then we can always move it to formal action, so.
With that being said, are we allowing people's, is the discussion online still available for people if they want to?
Yeah, I believe
in
it's.
on that?
I have taken it off for now.
Okay.
I can add it back in. If we did that, would there be any other questions you guys would want to put on there? Like,
I don't.
the respondents, how many people would actually get chickens or something to that effect?
I don't think I would need any other. I mean, it'd be nice to put it back up with whatever the proposed ordinance with their changes that we put in there to see if people have thoughts about those changes, but I don't think we would need any additional questions or anything. You guys?
Yep.
Need anything?
Nope, I agree with that.
So you just want to bring it back to discussion next meeting with the changes?
Yes.
Okay. Good on that, Ken?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll move on to B then. Follow up to the joint city county commission meeting, the sales tax for the roads. Kent?
Yes, sir. Put in front of you, we had a good meeting last Monday with the county commissioners and also Colorado city officials. The boards at that time agreed to go back to their own meetings to discuss and kind of come up with some figures or what they would like to see in an actual proposed ballot issue if everybody decides to move forward. And I put in there 5 different questions for you. The first one was the projects that we would like to see completed. We have an 8th Street project, which is probably the most major project, the primary project. Basically going from Delau to Main Street, which is about 10 blocks, and then Main Street to Caldwell, which I put 4, and JJ correctly corrected me there. It went through 3 blocks. But it ends up over $5 million. And that was with an estimate, I talked previously with Andrew from EBH and had an estimate of about $300,000 per block. With inflation and construction costs, made it as an estimate of $400,000, and we all know that's a guesstimate. By the time the tax would be instituted and we could actually do a project or actually do the actual construction, it would end up to be 25 or 26, 2025 that is, or 2026 at the earliest. And who knows in 3 years time frame what the actual cost would be. But that's just a guesstimate of 5.6 million. Then it would be completing the other half of 17th Street. This summer, we're going to be replacing 17th Street basically from next to school or elevator at Main Street and 17th, or just west of that. And then heading to between Montana and Kansas. Well, that's about halfway to Cattle Trail, or to the intersection where you start trying to get onto Highway 27. Using, again, about the same cost to redo that in concrete, that entire way. And the reason why you would do it in concrete is it's better, holds up better with the truck traffic that goes to the different grain elevators, not just schoolers, but ADM along there. And the other grain storage that's along there. But that would end up to be $2.4 million. And then a Caldwell project, there's a little bit different cost estimate. Worst case would be do it in concrete again, which would be about 7 blocks, would be 2.8 million. If it was from 10th to 17th on Caldwell. If you just did a 2-inch mill and overlay and not worry about working on the curbs, you could end up maybe around $500,000 per block. I mean, $500,000 total actually. With oil prices, that's a real guesstimate. I mean, that could end up quite a bit more, but I don't think it will ever reach the concrete price to do that project. And you could switch that around to do asphalt on the others. The question that always is staff likes to remind councils to be reminded of is on your main travel routes, the life cycle cost of asphalt versus concrete. Concrete will last you 20 to 30 years before you end up having to do much of anything with them. Now there are further costs as you go down the line beyond that, but you shouldn't have too much damage to your concrete streets within the first 15 to 20 years. You might have some sealing to do, you might have a failure in one little square here and there, depending on the concrete itself, but you shouldn't have any major failures. Whereas in asphalt, usually 10 years after you've done it, you should be doing something additional with that asphalt street. Doing another seal job, doing a mill and overlay, something. And probably doing that once a decade from then on. Now, that depends on the traffic, but on the main traffic ways, which all 3 of these projects are, that's where you want to spend your bigger dollars, your bigger projects to do that, because that's what people drive more often, and your truck traffic drives. The total of all those 3 projects with the assumptions presented, and I included some assumptions in the agenda packet, would end up with just over $10 million if you did those 3 projects that way. So the second question is, what is the percentage of the sales tax to go to the city of Goodland? The prior interlocal agreement in 2006 had it as 27.77% go to the city. I think it was with the actual project cost that they came up with that specific an amount. But with that percentage, the current sales tax generates about it generated 1.35 million. In 2020, it generated a little bit more than 1.4 million in 2021. It'll probably generate probably 1.5 in 2022 if everything continues to the end of the year. And then I took an example saying that for the city, that would end up to be $337,500 if it was 25% of that 1.35 million. And I just tried to split it, saying, okay, we're going to add Counterado, have 5%, just to use as a budgeting figure. So if we did it for 10 years, obviously that's a little over. These questions all kind of combine with each other. It's not asking you a specific answer on the first couple. The answers that we need from the board come at the end, or it kind of ties all together. But if the sales tax issue was for 10 years, then obviously that would generate about 3.37 million using those assumptions. Well, that means you could do 17th Street project or Caldwell in its entirety if you did Caldwell with the asphalt, but you wouldn't be able to touch A Street, or you'd only be able to do a portion of A Street, because A Street's over 5 million. If it was for 15 years on the sales tax, you could end up doing A Street. But then there would be a little bit short of doing it all the way to Caldwell. You could do it all the way to Maine. And then if 20 years, that would be 6.75 million. You could do 8th Street and then a portion of one of the others, or you could do Caldwell, the 2-inch mill and overlay. Now that's assuming our revenues stay the same throughout the whole 20 years. And just like the last 20-year issue, they've generated more money over the time. And that's why they're able to retire the sales tax in 17 years and not in 20 years like they originally forecasted. So they were able to save 3 years on the end of it. But what you put in the actual ballot issue that goes to the voters, you want that to be conservative, and that it actually generates what you're expecting it to do. That gives, because the previous one was tied to a bond issue, that gives the bond, you get a lower interest rate because they can see that, yeah, that's a conservative figure. You'll be able to make the payments no matter what. So that's assuming we stay at the 1% sales tax.
May I interrupt just real quick?
Please,
I could.
I'm talking too long.
On the bond issue part, did we ever look into, or have we figured out yet, does it have to be tied to a bond when we do it, or can it just be a percentage and we decide after the fact if we want to bond or just kind of use as we collect?
I did not get a specific answer back from our bond attorney, Kevin Cowan, but I've seen it occur that way. I wanted to ask him this, he was out last week, so I wasn't able to get an answer from him. But I'm assuming that's the case.
Okay. Please continue.
So those are the total costs, and that's assuming that the revenue generation stays the same. I would assume, especially as the inflation takes off, and if the world doesn't fall apart, there would be more revenue generated. Every time the cost goes up, obviously the sales tax would go up, and the amount of revenue would generate would probably go up that is collected. There was some discussion at the joint meeting of raising it to 1.25% instead of 1%. And as I stated at the meeting, that there's some assumptions with that. How are you going to do that? Because there was some discussion about doing it as you go on the project. And, is construction cost going to stay lower than what you would actually finance it at? Who's to say whether it wouldn't be cheaper to go ahead and borrow the money and get the project done? Because you don't know what construction costs are going to be in 5 or 10 years. It could blow out whatever amount you're borrowing the money at. Interest rates are going to start rising as well. They're starting to do that at the Fed right now too. So that's probably going to increase as well. But there may be a perception as well, since people, you know, the commission in November really made an emphasis to the people to say the city wasn't part of this issue, to the 1% sales tax ballot issue, and that was the reason to vote against the ballot issue in November. Now, if there's a raise in that amount from 1.1 to 1.25 or whatever number that is, 1.2, 1.4, 1.5, whatever, that difference, the messaging could come across the same, well, it's because the city has added on their projects. And it's the city's fault that it's being asked for an additional. And that might be hard to overcome in any messaging when saying, no, this is our cost for our projects, that's all we're looking to get done. That's all it would have been if it was 1%. But staff will take the direction from the commission and with your discussions with the other boards, and we'll do whatever the board wants to do as far as what percentage it is. And we'll try to get the messaging out. This is the exact projects we're looking at. Is doing 8th Street, Caldwell, 17th Street, and some portion of those. These are big ticket projects. I do have it on the 5th one, that's more for yourselves. Should the ballot issue just be for street, or should it include other items? That's a separate discussion. I will say, as far as the city's monies that get for street projects itself, there's no way within the revenue we get currently from the state or from the monies that are dedicated already to capital projects. There's not a way for us to do these projects instead of work on every other street in town. I mean, I guess we could do that, but we will wait a long time to work on any other street in town. And so it really isn't a question, it won't be a question for the voters if this sales tax issue is presented of either or. You know, well, they could just do it on their own. They're just asking for additional money. These are such, as I put the amounts on here, these are big ticket items. And what's the total amount, Kenton, we usually spend on a project, or maybe Andrew knows?
Still?
Yeah.
Right now, we're around 160,000.
A year?
162,000 is what we got budgeted this year, I think.
Yeah,
So that's annually between 150 and 170,000. So if you have, you know, $10 million in projects, or even if it's a little bit less than that, if you would do it asphalt, there's just no way. Okay, we won't chip and seal for the next 20 years. And we'll do this project instead. That would still only generate, you know, whatever amount that is.
I'm not gonna come up with it.
$21, $22 million. I mean, not even that. No.
2.3 million.
2.3 million. So if we wouldn't chip seal for 20 years, it's only doing a quarter of this project. We really need this type of sales tax to help supplement how we take care of roads. You know, and it may not seem like there's huge problems right now, but that's probably the better time to do the projects. Because if you wait to do it until it's in really bad shape or really severe shape, it ends up costing more, because then you have to rework the base, and you have to start doing some other things to make it happen. And then your people who live here right now have to live with it while it's in horrible shape.
So,
But what should we bring back to, with this kind of information within it, what kind of information should we bring back to the county commission?
I guess my thoughts are, I think the 8th Street project is an important project that needs to be top on the list, that we try to accomplish with this moving forward. As far as, you know, the size of the percentage of the tax, I would prefer we try to keep it at 1%, personally. You know, I do realize that cost of things is getting more expensive, but you know, everybody's feeling that all the way around, you know. And I think that we just need to be diligent in working within a little tighter budget if we have to try to accomplish the needs that we need to get done, because that's what we all have to do. We all have to work within a budget, you know, and just because we have the power to try to generate as much money as we think we need doesn't mean that we should, I think. I kind of like the 70-25-5 split that you had figured up there. I think that's pretty fair for what everybody's trying to accomplish. You know, as far as time-wise, 20 years is probably what it's going to take. As far as other issues and stuff, you know, there's always infrastructure things that needs to happen. I suppose the discussion needs to delve further into, you know, do we have to tie it to bond right away? Does it have to be specific type of infrastructure, you know, projects that we're doing? I just feel like maybe there's more information that we need to know what the requirements are going to be from the get-go as to exactly what projects we want to try to accomplish. If we have to have everything figured out from the very beginning, or we can do our first big project and then worry about other infrastructure projects later. You know, that's how I feel about it anyway. Your guys' thoughts?
I certainly think we need to do what we can to avoid going any higher than the continuation of the 1%. I think that, you know, even though that was soundly defeated back in November, I think that was still somewhat of a referendum on the sales tax just in general. And if we try to go any higher than that 1%, I don't think it'll pass. So I think we need to stay with a continuation of the 1% and work, like Aaron said, work with what that generates. I think the Caldwell project is our most important thing that we need to have on the top of the priority list. We have to get that done.
You mean 8th Street?
The Caldwell or the
8th
sorry?
Street.
Okay.
8th Street. I figured you were saying 8th Street.
Yeah, my question is, if it doesn't pass, what will we do then?
well, we either work with the county to put forward a different measure, or we let it retire and not put a measure on the ballot, and we just let those projects wait. The other thing that we could do is then put forward a proposal on our own. That's not a joint proposal. And whatever that amount would end up to be, to put forward to the voters. Those would be three options. Be three doors to try to handle it. So.
Certainly, I think our best option right now is to try to continue what's already in place to minimize any impact on the customers.
My thoughts are, you keep the 1% as it is, but go back to the 27.77% that we're getting now instead of the 25%, because we're already getting that amount, which brings your total up quite a bit more.
We have it at 25% because of the CanRado piece of it.
Yes. So are you wanting to not have CanRado involved, or have
No, they
that
can
further
still be
come
involved
out of the
county's
percentage?
They can give a little bit and we gave a little bit. You know, well, we would be.
Well,
giving-
yeah, if we stay up to 27.7, we're not giving anything.
But yeah, keep the 27.
Any other thoughts?
This one's gonna be an earache, I can tell you.
Yeah, as far as, percentages and goes, that will be a bigger discussion with the county and Canarado as well, but.
Yeah, this is proposed. What figures could look like.
And the only
Probably.
reason that it had Canarado at 5% was they didn't have an awful big project to do at the start. That's
Mhm.
not their percentage of people in the county or the roads, it's just a big project to start that we're looking at. And
What was theirs? Sorry.
their project,
Yeah, how much was it, were they looking at again?
I actually don't know if I ever got a figure from
I don't know
them.
if it was 2 or 3 blocks.
It was,
I think
they
it's-
needed,
I guess it depends, because there's like 3 blocks there
I wanna,
of that main road, but then I think there was like a half a block turning back. So 3 or 4 blocks worth of concrete, I think, is what they were
So
looking
it's
at
like
there,
what?
but
2 million, 3 million, something like that?
yeah. But their percentage,
Like 1.6 or 4 blocks.
You're better at math.
and a railroad crossing that they need to
yeah.
improve for truck traffic, but.
And we don't know if that's gonna be, their absolute final project or not. I think that was just the one that was forefront in their minds that needed to be done, when we discussed it the other day.
Sure.
And that doesn't include any participation from the private entity that's kind of causing this to come about. There probably should be some participation from that entity, because that is the primary reason that is coming to the forefront. So,
In Canarado's defense, that road has been terrible for a long time, and it is their main road into town. I think regardless of if they had this big company coming in or not, it's probably something that they will have to address sooner rather than later. But any other thoughts? So I feel like we're kind of leaning, of course, we're not making any final decisions on anything, but we're kind of leaning towards trying to keep it at the 1%. As far as length of time, 20 years,
I gotta use it 20 years, yeah.
and at the very least, 8th Street is probably our top priority.
We had one, yes. Or had to pick.
I think that gives us enough to move forward with in our discussions at this point anyway.
sure.
Okay. Now let's move on to item C, the follow-up to the joint county commission meeting regarding the housing study and the recommendations.
There was, there was a Sherman County housing study. It also completed some information regarding the city of Goodland, and it had some recommendations for different programs or projects that could be considered by the city commission or the county commission to help certain things occur. The main couple items that they had discussed was a land-based program, whatever version of that would work for this community, if it would work. And then also a rehabilitation program of some type. But in order to go through those and come up with an actual proposal that would be presented to the city commission, it was suggested to have a working group of, one city commissioner, one county commissioner, and some staff members, and also Sherman County Community Development, and just look through different proposals and then try to agree, have a consensus on presenting 1 or 2 or 3 items, programs that could be presented to the city commission or county commission, whichever one is appropriate for it to be instituted. So that was the request, and it was just see if there would be a city commissioner that'd be willing to volunteer to be a part of that. Everybody else step back.
Yeah, yeah.
I would volunteer myself.
Second that motion.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I do think it's an important thing, you know, and thank you for stepping up and willing to do that.
Sure.
You know, and I do hope, you know, it's just another small step that we can take towards a bigger picture growth that we're trying to accomplish in our community, so. Any other discussion on that? Okay, we'll move on to D, the proposed mobile food vendor ordinance.
And this is just a start, but it's, provides an example ordinance. We found an example ordinance in Cheney. We actually found several across the state, but Cheney was the one that was amongst different folks. Seemed to be a solid beginning. Chief Hayes helped put together this version that would be City of Goodland. But it's really just a starting point. And have you guys give a few comments before staff would dress it up and get it prepared for actual consideration.
Well, I'm going to be honest and say that I did not find enough time to read properly through this whole ordinance. There's a lot of reading in there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you guys had a chance to really
20.
dive through it good or not, but I think I would maybe prefer to take a couple weeks to really read through it good and come up with any thoughts, comments, or changes we may want. Bring it up for discussion again next meeting. Unless you guys have other things you would. I mean, if you guys are more prepared than me, then by all means we can discuss it. But I'm not prepared on this issue.
I guess out of all of us, I think Ann's probably had the most experience in these.
Mm-hmm.
So, I don't know, Ann, did you have enough time to read through?
One thing I have, so it says about sound devices, does that, I know it says amplify music just to get people there, I don't know.
The light generators and things like that, I mean, some of those generators can be, is that gonna be an endurance between 8, I think it was 8 and 8, or 10 and 8?
Decibels?
No, just the 10, between 10 a.m. and 8 p.m.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I've got a variety of different generators that we use for ours. And as far as sound goes and things like that, depending on where it is this for everybody, like for the folks that sit out there near Walmart? Or is this, are we pretty much trying to work this as the, for the downtown markets that we're talking about having here with Jaleesa and everything else?
If you're gonna have an ordinance to this effect, you would have to apply it to everybody within the city limits.
Yeah, gotcha.
Unless you put it in that exempt section, right? Talking
I
about
think
like
it's in the exempt
the
section.
organizations
Okay.
and stuff like that.
Was your question directed at me?
Well, no, I don't know, I think as far as sounding, generators, I know we've been to a few events where our generator has caused an issue
Right.
with sound and things like that, so I know with, depending on where people would set up and things like that, or where they're allowed to set up.
Right, I don't think so, because I looked at, our noise ordinance. Because I changed that because I thought it was a little too close to our noise ordinance. So I cut it back to 8 p.m. to give people time to, clean up, pack up and go. But I think that would, that would probably fall under the noise ordinance. Unless it was, like Jake just said, it was specified in this that generators were included in that. People have power, like a chainsaw or something like that, unless it's after the noise ordinance, it's not a lot, with construction and all that. So that's why I changed that to 8 p.m.
Any other questions?
At this point, no.
I'd certainly like some more time to look through it, but
It is wordy.
right there.
Want to go and bring it back next meeting under discussion item again then?
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fine. Jake, did you have a chance to look through this thing?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What were your, is there anything that we need to be looking out?
Well, so again, I'm gonna go back, I'm gonna start to build a reputation of Captain Penalty here, but same idea, right? So you've got a penalty and violation section, okay? The whole thing is, you really need to set out in here what your penalties are gonna be, okay? So right now, we just got it as this basic, it's gonna be the same penalties as set forth in section blank, but there isn't one, there doesn't exist right now, so we have to do that.
Okay.
So, it's the same idea there on what you're gonna do. What I would suggest, what's gonna be different in this versus like with the chickens or anything like that, is that this is going to be, I mean, by its very nature, it's going to be truck specific. I mean, it's one truck, one permit, and that stuff. We're not dealing with, yeah, but then how many burgers can they sell and all this other stuff? How many generators, how loud can they play Metallica, you know, stuff like that. It's still gonna be specific to the application, do you have your license? That's the yes/no question, right? And then when it gets down to it, sure, we can have these other pieces that are helping to kind of regulate that and what that's gonna look like, but your penalty section, I would keep it pretty close to the amounts and fines and fees of what it's gonna cost for them to get a license. Because if your fine is less than what it's gonna cost me to get a license, then why do I care?
Right.
If I'm only coming into town for this one event and it's gonna cost me $25 or whatever, and if we have a fine in there of $10, then I'm gonna say, well, I'm gonna run the risk. And then I get a fine, so then I pay $10 and I leave the very next morning. So, that mean there's that deterrent effect piece that gets a part of that. The other parts that I was kind of looking through too, and again, this is all workshop, you know, thoughts here. I think you probably, what would be helpful is when you have specific events, obviously the events themselves, they block streets and be like that, so you're gonna have event-specific areas. Food truck vendors, then they're gonna be at the event, right? But I think there's gonna be in certain situations, particularly when it comes to public property, if you're gonna allow them on public property or around public property, it would probably be helpful to go ahead and have some pre-designated, pre-approved areas that you can bring in your food truck. Just so, again, everybody knows, you know what, like going back to like what Ann's talking about, it seems like the same barbecue, food truck, whatever, always goes out to Walmart, goes on that concrete slab there. That's private property, but just run with me. What if somebody comes to Chambers Park every Sunday or something like that to do a food truck? It would be nice and easier for your officers or anybody who's enforcing this to know that, no, as long as they're in those areas, I'm not so concerned because those are already pre-approved areas. That also eliminates your concern of, okay, can you give me your written permission slip? Can I see that you've gotten permission to be here? Stuff like that. I just think if you have an area that the vendors already know, I can be here, and then they can move over here, and as long as they're already in another pre-approved area, it just helps cut down on your, what I'm gonna say, enforcement issues. Just a thought, though. I mean, now again, subject to change, but, and I would not tie it to events. I would say, yeah, we're perfectly fine with people going out to the ball diamonds. We're perfectly fine with people doing this at this park or at that park and stuff like that, to where we're not so concerned with where they're at.
Okay.
Good
Good
thoughts.
thoughts, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else, let's move on to reports. Kent, start us off, please.
Switch a little bit around. Just a follow-up on the low-income water rates from last time. We don't have that many people that participate in it. It is pretty strict income guidelines for it. Because we actually set an amount in code. Any household whose total annual income is 18,000 or lower. That's pretty limited. We do have a certain number of customers. I mean, it's 15 customers current. But the current code is says that it shall be 15% lower on than the water rate, and there's no meter charge. So there will continue to be no meter charge. It just will be the rate itself, which was raised a nickel up to 4,000 cubic feet, and then 20 cents, I think, on above 4,000 cubic feet per 100 cubic feet. So if you want us to change that part of the code, we certainly can. But it does continue pretty close, given the low income water rate user. It'll keep their bill pretty much the same as it is now. They may have a couple, depending on their usage, it won't be as much as the other people. But if you want it exactly the same, we can craft something to change it and be able to do that. So just give, what is your consensus, or what's your direction to staff regarding that?
I guess my own personal thoughts and complaints about it is that the set amount of $18,000, regardless of the household size, I mean, I feel like there's, just looking at I have the 2020 poverty guidelines here, a household of 2, the poverty line is 18,310. You get a household of 4, say you have an actual family, a low income family, you're almost at $28,000 at that point of the actual federal, poverty guidelines. So I just wonder how many, families are truly low income, based on the poverty guidelines that don't qualify for those lower rates. So my thoughts are, do we need to adjust that $18,000 hard limit to something more of a tiered rate, like the actual poverty guideline rates based on household?
Or to state it a different way, not to have an actual number. Jake, just like other attorneys, often say, don't put the actual number in code, because in order to change it, you got to have an ordinance to change it.
Mm-hmm.
If it refers to an actual criteria that is common or a national standard, we could craft an ordinance to do that, to state something like that. So it would just have to be something that could be easily followed and not be a disagreement topic or a negotiation topic. It's got to be something really solid.
Like the national poverty guidelines.
Yeah.
I don't know, what are your guys' thoughts on that?
I'd certainly like to see us fall in line with the national guidelines. I feel like that's probably the most fair way to look at it. Is that something, is this, in your experience, Ken, is that how the other communities have done it, where you come from?
Really haven't had a specific criteria in the water rate ordinance like this. This is actually a new example for myself.
And it's not just water, it's also electric utility. They get this kind of electric utility too.
Have you come across this any place else, Jake?
No, most of the time people have to apply for that. There's different programs for that. Obviously, bigger cities, they have, again, much more of a, backing and grant base, and a lot of times the private companies, whether it's private, power, electric, Power and Light out of Kansas City and all that stuff, they have their own programs that they do. So, but we're kind of sitting here in a kind of a weird hybrid, right?
Mm-hmm.
The only other thing, and I don't know this, is when do the national guidelines come out versus when is your billing cycle going to come through? That's another thing to consider. I understand it's probably year to year, but does it come out first of the year? Is it in the middle of the year? Is it called fiscal year? That's just something to help your people in these offices then to know, okay, we understand that the guidelines might have come out now, but this bill for June is really only talking about May's usage. So, and when does that come off, and where do you change around that stuff? I'm not saying it's impossible, but there's going to be some logistics to help with that. Versus, again, now going to the other side, if you stick a number in there, they know that that's the cutoff, and they know that's the cutoff every year until it's changed. So if you leave it open to, you know, subject to the national poverty guidelines, you can do that. It's just gonna be a matter of getting in a new system of when do we do that, when does that turnover happen? And then the same thing, and then you start the, what I'm gonna call the PR campaign then out there to all these people, let them know, hey, just be aware, if you meet this, you can have this, but you're, you know, it shouldn't be put on your people to determine that, it should be on the customer to
Yeah,
come
on
to
the
that.
applicant to come in.
Yes.
It's very difficult to, how do I want to say this? It's very difficult to know that the information they're providing is correct.
Determined, yeah.
You
You know,
know,
that,
It would take a lot of extra verification and approval in order to verify that.
Mary, do you currently do any kind of verification for the current limits?
They bring in, like, most of the ones that we have are on Social Security, and they bring in what their Social Security is every year. Now, how do we know they don't have other income? You don't. You don't. And, you know, I think you're gonna, if you open it to bigger guidelines, you're gonna have a lot of problems there. That's my fear.
I mean,
it's something that we could base on, like annual tax returns. Do we have the authority to require like a tax return in order to apply for the
Under a
program?
certain limit, you don't have to file a tax return. So you end up with that situation as well, so.
And the big word is there, have to. That also doesn't mean that everybody does either. I do. I do not want somebody knocking on my door tomorrow.
Which you could get it, and you wouldn't qualify for the program.
At that point, you will be Mr. Papa George. No, but again, don't lose sight that yes, but it just becomes down to logistics, right? So the same idea. The idea of laws and codes is not that there's this magical machine out there that stops people from doing things, right? The laws by their very nature are reactive. Unfortunately, people who want to game the system will find a way to do it. That's just how it works. Now, you can, as far as an application pool and things like that, you can get them to sign off that they understand that this is under the penalty of perjury and is subject to prosecution if it's determined that these are falsified incomes or number of people in their household or this, that, and the other. You know, you can do that. It just...
How far do you go?
Well, really, I mean, that's really what it gets down to. And that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that there isn't a repercussion to that, right? Things like that get turned over to the Attorney General's office, the County Attorney's office, stuff like it just does. But again, it's just a matter of what system do you put in place and how can you actually get this, the verification of income, household numbers, things like that, you know? And that's just a matter of how much responsibility do you put on your people versus on the people that are actually seeking the reduction and stuff like that.
How loud do you think about that?
You're still good, it's not 8 o'clock.
Okay, so
Okay, so
this is something we want to think about.
We want to try to come up with some additional information regarding what we could do as far as the application process.
Why don't staff just present a couple of additional pieces of information in the next packet, and then you can decide where do we go.
Go from there?
Sure.
That sound good?
Good.
Okay. All right, thank you. Continue on.
Would also like to, I'm not making this a goal, but it seems like I'm making this a goal, is in order to have the city commission meet every single Monday. But,
Hey, you're doing wonderful at it, yeah.
would like, we had talked about scheduling a city tour and talked about different dates. Would like possibly to set one up for next Monday. Right now, it looks like the weather will be nice next Monday, so that would be a blessing as well. But, and hopefully talk with y'all as far as what time to start and be able to finish up. I did send a note to Jason as far as getting a vehicle that we could tour the city with all together, and then if we could start in the middle of the afternoon, 3 o'clock, if that would be workable with all of your professions. I know that might be kind of tough, but with sunlight only extending until 7 o'clock, if we're going to be seeing stuff on the outside, that's wouldn't leave much time if it was 5 or 5:30. So
At this point in time, for me, I feel like that's a workable thing. Like I said, we're getting very soon into the time where we will have to put it off for a couple of months if we don't get it done. For me, anyway. But
It works. I think it should be an issue.
So if at 3 o'clock, and we'll start at the power plant, if possible, and then we'll proceed to different areas of the city shops, the parks building, and the couple buildings that have gone on behind the parks building. And then head to the water treatment plant, the wastewater treatment plant, and the airport, and the police building at the end. Just as long as you promise not to have the police chief arrest me at the end of the tour for taking too long.
no
And,
guarantees being made.
But if we could try to do that, we'll discuss in the department head meeting as far as the actual times for that, but try to get that accomplished in 4 hours. We'll see if we can. There might be some variations as we go along, depending on your questions or concerns. But it's really just to give you a visual look at some of the things that we talk about here a couple different times a month. So it's really nothing more than that.
So as far as logistically, with the 5 commissioners all being together for this tour, do we have to call it a traveling meeting? Can we just
don't talk.
state that no discussion of city no city discussion will happen?
As long as there's no formal actions taken, most of the time when I've taken commissioners on different tours, it's, you announce it to the public, you're not doing any actions, you're not talking about, you're just viewing operations,
Yeah,
really.
as long as we're not discussing city-related activities amongst ourselves about what's going on, and we're just taking in.
So no chicken talk.
There'll
Correct.
be no chickens on the tour. So, and the department heads will be available to answer any or point out different things. They know their individual places far better than I do or anybody here at City Hall does, and they can point out different things. Neil will have a special presentation as well at one of the treatment plants.
So looking forward to it.
But if that can work, and we can basically go from 3 till 7 or just at sunset. So
3 p.m. we're meeting here, is that correct?
Power plant.
at the power plant.
Thank you, sorry.
If that would be okay. Okay. I think that's enough for tonight. I don't think I have anything else that's of major concern. Did include, we are going to need to be pulling well number 3 and investigating it. I don't know if you have any additional information on that, Neil, at this point or no.
At this point in time, I really don't. It's got a vibration in it somewhere. And before you get out of your vehicle, you can hear the roof rattling. So there's something not right. And before we get into June, July, August, and lose a well, I'd rather have it pulled now before we get into our busy season and find out what's wrong with it, and then get it back in, get it back to pumping again. It's kind of the idea of doing it soon rather than later.
And the electrical substation, Dustin had originally gotten a quote to get some bushings replaced and was told it was gonna be 6 to 8 weeks, and then they showed up last week and got it taken care of, so.
Good deal.
With our supply chains the way it is, it seems like it's either here the next day or it's 6 months from now, you know, there's like no in between, so. Is there anything additional we need to do with that to get, is there any additional project with that needs to occur?
Not on the substation.
Not on the substation.
So we'll have, we have a agreement with KMEA to do some breaker maintenance, and that's over a 3-year period. So, we did have an issue reclosing a breaker, but then, we did some maintenance ourselves. So, we're good to go.
That was at the substation just on the north side of the power plant, so asked Dustin already as part of the power plant to take a look at the substation and show you where that got taken care of here last week as well. So that'll be part of it. We did get a control burn, most of the control burn at the airport taken care of, at least on the northeast side of the main road and the taxiway. It'll be a while before we attempt any other part of it. And then one other thing that Commissioner Howard asked last time as far as the 17th Street project, they are looking to come in April, and Andrew had stated that we will look either this week or next week to have a pre-construction meeting, so.
Yeah, next week or the following week. They're gonna look at coming tentatively right now the second week of April. I was gonna send Jerry out today to talk to people down there, but he might have shot me if I were to request to do that, so. But they're planning on moving their plant. They have a portable plant that sits on the south side of the interstate. They'll move that in the week of the 4th, and we'll either do, our pre-construction meeting for 17th Street next week or that week, that first full week of April. So it just kind of depends on how the contractor's schedule falls. Yep.
And they will start, they were talking about already to start contacting the residents to let them know in that neighborhood as far as when the project will actually start. And we'll start putting messaging up on the city's website as well, as soon as we know a solid date when they'll start, because 17th Street does get traveled on by most of the public here, so, at one time or another.
And they do have a completion date on that they have to have that done by, so that way we don't interrupt any type of harvest traffic.
That won't be the entire project, that'll be the portion that's next to school, correct?
Everything will be completed before, is it June 15th? I need to look back and see when that date is.
So it won't be with wheat harvest, it'll be
No, yeah, we have specific dates in there to be completed prior to.
Okay. That's it.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you, Ken. Move on to commissioner reports. Commissioner Showalter, anything?
You always start with me.
You're on the end.
I have nothing to report tonight, thank you.
Commissioner Myers.
I just want to thank everybody who's come out to my restaurant to talk about the chickens one way or the other, and the folks who have actually gone online and actually put their comments, whether yay or nay for them. It does help a lot to actually see all those.
Commissioner Howard.
Just thanks to all the people that have applied for the different boards and the Board of Appeals and the Trades Board, all those that have came forward and want to do some more stuff for the city of Goodland, and all the city employees for what they do, and a shout out to the girls basketball team for winning state.
Yeah.
Commissioner Redland.
Yep, I also echo the shout out to the Goodland Cowgirls. It's not every day you win state, that's for sure. What is it, 42 years?
Yes.
I think that's what.
Last time we won, so that's pretty cool. I also think that our the Board of Trades and the Planning Commission is coming along, and we're still taking applications for Planning Commission. Just bringing that back up. Still need to fill 3 more slots. So, thanks again. Thanks to all the city workers. Your work is appreciated very much.
Okay, for the mayor's report, I have nothing more to add. So I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
A second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.